And this is all a part of a PR blitz for Charlie's upcoming book on honoring the Shabbat, which I'm not gonna be doing because I'm Christian. So I'd like to already just say no, okay?
Okay, wait, so are you implying that Charlie Kirk, who wrote a book on why Christians should honor Shabbat, was not a Christian? Listen, you do what you want. Nobody is forcing you to keep any of God's commandments against your will. But the notion that honoring the Sabbath is somehow incompatible with being a Christian is incoherent and contrary to Scripture. Jesus himself kept the Sabbath. Luke records that it was his custom to go to the synagogue on the Sabbath day. The expression, as was his custom in Luke 4:16, is significant since Luke uses similar wording elsewhere to describe habitual practice. The use of this expression here shows that Jesus, like other religious Jews of his time, regularly took part in the synagogue services on the Sabbath day. The gospel writer clearly depicts Jesus as a faithful, Sabbath-observant Jew who upheld this practice consistently throughout his life. Even when Jesus was challenged over the Sabbath and accused of violating it, he never claimed that the Sabbath had been abolished or that his followers did not have to keep it. Rather, in every such dispute, he offers a legal defense explaining why his healings and other actions on the Sabbath were permissible and why the charges brought against him were unfounded. He explicitly describes his behavior as quote-unquote lawful, meaning in accordance with God's law, the Torah. Not only did Jesus keep the Sabbath, but his earliest followers, the first Christians, literally meaning followers of Christ, continued to keep the Sabbath as well. After the crucifixion, Luke records that the women who followed Jesus, quote, rested according to the commandment, postponing their plans to anoint his body until the Sabbath day was over. According to the scholar Isaac Oliver, Luke's mention of the women's obedience, quote, highlights his eagerness to illustrate that the Jewish followers of Jesus remain faithful in their observance of the Sabbath and the Torah in general, end quote. The fact that these early Christians prioritized honoring the Sabbath even after Jesus' death is quite surprising if Christians in principle don't keep the Sabbath, as you, Candace, would have us believe. However, what Luke records here is precisely what we would expect if the earliest Christians continued to believe that the Sabbath was important. Additionally, throughout the book of Acts, Luke repeatedly records the Apostle Paul keeping the Sabbath. In Acts 13, Paul and Barnabas attend and teach in the synagogue at Poseidon Antioch on consecutive Sabbaths. Likewise, Luke records that Paul went to the river outside Philippi to pray on the Sabbath, and that he regularly took part in synagogue worship on the Sabbath in both Thessalonica and Corinth. Luke explicitly calls synagogue attendance on the Sabbath Paul's custom, just like it was Jesus' custom.